When I left the military, I thought I'd finally get to breathe again. No more paperwork, no more hearings, no more people saluting just because they had to. But life had other plans. 2 years into retirement, one call pulled me straight back into a different kind of battlefield, my own family. It was late afternoon when my plane landed in Austin. The Texas sun hit the tarmac like a punishment, and for a second I thought maybe I'd made a mistake coming back. But when I heard my nephew Noah's voice on the phone the night before, something in me twisted. He sounded hollow, like a man already halfway gone. So I packed my duffel bag, the same one I carried through 2 deployments, and came home. The house hadn't changed much, at least from the outside. A white porch, paint peeling at the edges, a yard that used to smell like barbecue on weekends. Now it looked abandoned, as if joy itself had moved out. I parked the rental car and just sat there, watching the curtains move slightly in the window. When Noah opened the door, I barely recognized him. The last time I saw him, he was walking tall in his uniform, full of confidence. Now, his shoulders were hunched, a cane by his side, and the spark in his eyes was gone. The kind of look I'd seen on too many soldiers who made it home but left pieces of themselves behind. "Aunt Evelyn," he said quietly, forcing a smile. "Didn't think you'd actually come." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You called, didn't you? That's enough for me." He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Behind him, the air smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. Something was off. Inside, the living room was spotless, but lifeless. Too neat, too quiet, a woman's touch, but not in a good way. Everything was arranged like a stage set, as if someone cared more about appearances than comfort. "Where's Cassandra?" I asked, scanning the room. "Out," he said quickly. "She's been busy." I didn't press. But then I heard it, the click of high heels on tile. Cassandra Blake, my nephew's wife, walked in like she was arriving at a press conference. Expensive perfume, a phone in her hand, lips curled in that polished smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, if it isn't the legendary Colonel Shaw," she said. "Or is it Lieutenant Colonel now? I lose track." "Retired," I answered flatly. "You can just call me Evelyn." She gave a little laugh that didn't sound human. "Of course. We're so happy to have you here." I could almost hear the unspoken words. For now. Dinner that night was awkward, to put it mildly. Noah ate in silence, his hand trembling slightly as he lifted his fork. Cassandra talked the whole time about her new business, the stress of managing everything, and how some people just don't understand how hard life can be when one partner can't pull their weight. She said it without even glancing at Noah. My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. I'd learned in the service that silence can be a weapon when used right. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, and she waved me off with that fake smile again. "No need. We have a system." "Of course you do," I said. When she disappeared upstairs, I finally turned to Noah. "You want to tell me what's going on here?" He hesitated, eyes fixed on the table. "It's nothing, Aunt Ev. Just, things haven't been great since the accident." "Yeah, I figured that out the moment she called you one partner who can't pull his weight." He winced. "She's under pressure. Her parents." I cut him off. "Don't make excuses for someone who kicks you while you're down." He didn't answer, just sat there, looking small. And that broke something in me. This was the same kid who used to climb trees and get himself stuck on purpose just to prove he wasn't afraid of heights. The one who enlisted because he said, "You made justice look cool, Aunt Ev." I stayed quiet for a moment, trying to hold the anger back. Then I sawed a stack of unopened envelopes on the counter. Legal papers, court stamps, and one thick file marked divorce petition. I didn't say a word. I just stared at it. He noticed. "I wasn't going to hide it from you," he murmured. "But I didn't want you to come all this way and—" "Too late for that," I said. "Who filed it?" "Cassandra," he said softly. "She wants the house. And Lily." "Your daughter?" He nodded. I exhaled slowly. "And your lawyer?" "Her cousin recommended someone. I haven't met him yet." That told me everything I needed to know. Cassandra had already moved her chess pieces, and Noah was sitting there like a pawn waiting to be taken. I stood up and grabbed the divorce papers, flipping through them. It was the usual hit list: full property claim, child custody, spousal support. But one thing stood out: the legal phrasing. It was too sharp, too calculated. Cassandra hadn't written this with help from some lazy family lawyer. This was the work of someone who knew how to weaponize the system. I asked quietly, "Has she mentioned a man named Patrick Lowell?" Noah frowned. "How do you know that name?" "I've seen it before," I said. "Years ago, in procurement scandals, defense contracts, kickbacks, the kind of mess that ends careers." Noah looked confused. "What does that have to do with Cassandra?" I shook my head. "Not sure yet, but I intend to find out." The sound of a car door outside interrupted us. Cassandra's voice carried through the open window, sharp, laughing, not the voice of someone worried about her marriage. Another man's voice answered. I didn't need to look to know she wasn't alone. I turned back to Noah, who was staring at his plate like he could disappear into it. "You don't deserve this," I said quietly, "and she doesn't deserve you." He smiled weakly, the kind of smile people give when they've already accepted losing. "It's okay, Aunt Ev. Maybe this is just how things are now." "No," I said, my tone colder than I meant. "Not while I'm here." That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked in the wind, the air thick with something that felt like decay. From the guest room, I could hear faint voices downstairs, Cassandra on the phone again, whispering. I got up and moved quietly to the hall. "She's not going to stay long," she was saying. "The old woman's harmless. I'll handle her, just like I handled him." I didn't need to hear more. I'd heard that tone before, not from wives, but from enemies. People who thought manipulation was strategy. People who underestimated the wrong person. I went back to bed, but sleep never came. My mind was already working through patterns, timing, evidence. The instincts that I thought I'd buried when I left the JAG Corps came roaring back to life. Morning came too soon. The smell of burnt toast filled the kitchen. Noah was sitting alone, dressed like a ghost of himself. "Where's Cassandra?" I asked. "Left early," he muttered. "Said she had meetings." I poured myself coffee, black and bitter, and sat across from him. "Then it's a good day to talk about reality," I said. "You're being set up, Noah, and you need to let me help you." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You really think she's capable of that?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I don't think it. I know it." And right then, as the Texas sun spilled across the table, I made a silent promise to myself. I wasn't here for a family visit. I was here for a mission. And I never failed a mission. The sound of the old porch screen snapping shut stayed with me longer than it should have. Maybe because it was the only thing in that house that still had life in it. I walked through the hallway the next morning, the air stale and heavy. The walls were lined with framed pictures, family portraits, holidays, moments that used to mean something. Someone had rearranged them. Cassandra's face appeared in every frame, smiling perfectly beside a version of Noah who looked happier than the man sitting in that kitchen now. It was like she'd rewritten history with her own image. Lily's laughter used to echo through this house. Now, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that means people are pretending not to fight. When I reached the kitchen, Margaret was already there. My sister. I hadn't seen her in years, and even now she looked like she hadn't forgiven me for something I couldn't even remember doing. She turned, holding a mug. "You're up early." "Habit," I said. "The military ruins your ability to sleep in." "I'll leave." "Still playing the soldier," she said, stirring her coffee. "Even after all this time." I ignored the jab. "You look well." She smiled, but it was thin. "I'd look better if you called once in a while." There, it was the real reason for the hostility. Not Cassandra. Not Noah. Just old resentment left to ferment. I poured myself coffee, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I called plenty. You never picked up. Maybe because I didn't want to lecture." "I didn't call to lecture. I called because Mom was sick." She froze for half a second, then shrugged it off. "You always make everything sound like a mission." Before I could respond, Noah limped in. "Morning." Margaret's expression softened instantly. "Sweetheart, you look pale. Did you take your medication?" He nodded. "Yeah, Aunt Madgie." The way she said sweetheart made my skin crawl. She'd always babied him. And Cassandra? She'd learned how to use that to her advantage. Cassandra breezed in a few minutes later, wearing a crisp white blouse and that permanent smirk. "Oh, good. The whole family's here. What are we talking about? Old grudges? Or new ones?" I didn't take the bait. She leaned against the counter, sipping juice from a glass like she was posing for a lifestyle ad. "Noah, honey, I'll need your signature on some documents today. Just standard things for the house insurance. I looked up from my cup. You mean the house you're trying to take from him? Cassandra blinked slowly. Excuse me? Emit her eyes. Don't insult me, intelligence. Margaret frowned. Evelyn, please, don't start. No, let her talk, Cassandra said, her voice dripping with mock politeness. She clearly has something to get off her chest. I stood. What I have is experience. And what I see is a manipulative spouse trying to bury a man who already gave everything. End quote. Cassandra's smile faltered, but only for a moment. You must be confusing real life with your courtroom dramas, Colonel. Noah's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Can we not do this? The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut glass. Cassandra grabbed her purse and stormed out, heels cracking against the tile. The front door slammed a second later. Margaret glared at me. You just made things worse. Good, I said. Maybe worse is what it takes to get the truth out. That. Margaret shook her head, muttering something about me always needing to be the hero. When she left, Noah sighed. Aunt Ev, I appreciate you standing up for me, but Cassandra's not all bad. I raised an eyebrow. She's cheating on you, Noah, and she's trying to take your kid. He looked down. You don't know that for sure. Not yet, I said. But I will. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of phone calls and half-hearted conversation. I went out to the backyard for some air. The grass was dying. The swing Lily used to play on hung lopsided. The whole place looked like it was waiting for permission to fall apart. Then I saw her Lily, peeking out from the corner of the house. Her little face serious, eyes wide. Hey, kiddo, I said softly. You hiding from someone? She walked over slowly, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Mom says I shouldn't talk to you about the grown-up stuff. That's probably smart, I said. But you can still talk to me about you, right? She nodded, then looked around before whispering. Mom gets mad when I talk about Daddy's legs. I crouched down. What do you mean? She says it's his fault, that he was careless, but Daddy said it was the scaffolding. He said he didn't even see it coming. Her voice wavered. I put a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes grown-ups lie when they're scared, Lily. But that doesn't make it right. She bit her lip. Are you gonna make her stop being mean to Daddy? I hesitated. I'll try. When she smiled, I saw a little bit of Noah in her, the same warmth, the same quiet strength. And it reminded me why I couldn't just sit by. Inside, the house felt colder than before. Margaret was back, sitting in the living room with Cassandra's parents. They'd arrived sometime while I was outside, and they looked exactly how I imagined. The kind of people who think money equals morality. Cassandra's father, a slick man in an expensive gray suit, stood up when he saw me. Ah, the famous Aunt Evelyn, the one who loves giving orders. I crossed my arms. Only when people need them. His smile was razor thin. My daughter tells me you're trying to interfere in their marriage. I'm trying to stop a scam, I replied. His eyes darkened. Careful, Miss Shaw. Accusations like that can be costly. Not as costly as perjury, I said calmly. Margaret jumped in. Okay, enough. This is a family matter, not a courtroom. Then maybe your family should stop acting like a jury, I shot back. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Cassandra's parents left soon after, muttering about unstable veterans. Margaret avoided my eyes. That night, I found Noah sitting on the porch steps, a beer in his hand. He stared out at the yard, the glow of the streetlights catching the scars along his arm. I don't know how much more of this I can take, he said quietly. You've taken worse, I told him. But this time, you're not alone. He looked at me, the faintest glimmer of relief in his eyes. You really think I can win? I don't think, I said, looking out into the dark. I plan to make sure you do. From somewhere inside the house, I heard Cassandra's phone ringing again. Same deep male voice answering, laughter spilling through the air. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just sat there, feeling the familiar burn of resolve start to rise again, the kind that once made enemies nervous. Because this wasn't just about saving Noah anymore, it was about exposing the rot that had been hiding in plain sight. And I was done staying quiet. The front door creaked open, and a gust of cold air swept through the hallway. I didn't even need to look up to know it was Cassandra. That scent, too expensive and too strong, always arrived before she did. She walked in holding a shopping bag like it was a trophy. her smile wide and fake. "Morning," she said sweetly. "Hope everyone slept well." Noah muttered something close to, "Yeah," and turned back to his cereal. Margaret, sitting beside him, smiled like a proud aunt hosting a charity event. She had switched sides faster than I could blink. Cassandra slid her sunglasses up into her hair and sat down across from me. "Evelyn, I hope you don't mind. I've been handling most of the household things lately. With Noah's recovery, someone has to keep the bills straight." Her tone had that passive-aggressive melody that people use when they're used to getting their way. "Must be exhausting," I said dryly. "Keeping track of all the money you plan to take later." She tilted her head slightly. "Excuse me?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice even. "I said it must be exhausting keeping track of everything. Paperwork, finances, fake compassion. It's a full-time job." Margaret's voice cut in sharply. "Evelyn, that's enough." "Is it?" I turned to her. "You think I don't see what's happening? She's isolating him, controlling everything he touches, and you're helping her." Margaret slammed her hand on the table. "You've been here 2 days and already think you know everything. You always do. You think just because you wore a uniform you're the moral compass of this family." I met her glare. At least my compass still points north. The tension was so thick you could have carved it up and served it for breakfast. Cassandra smiled faintly, like she enjoyed the spectacle. "I think," she said, standing up, "we all need some time apart." She reached into her bag and dropped a thick envelope on the table. "Noah, these are the divorce papers. I already filed. You just need to sign." Noah froze, his spoon still halfway to his mouth. "What?" he whispered. She crossed her arms. "You heard me. This isn't working anymore. You're not the same man I married." He set his spoon down carefully, as if the smallest movement might break him. "I almost died, Cass." "I know," she said flatly. "And I was there. But now I have to think about Lily. She deserves stability." I couldn't hold it anymore. "You mean she deserves your version of stability, one that comes with a new bank account and a different last name?" Cassandra's eyes flashed. "You don't know anything about me." "Oh, I know enough," I said. "Like the fact that you've been spending more time with Patrick Lowell than with your husband." Her face drained of color. Margaret gasped quietly. "That's a lie," Cassandra said quickly. "Then you won't mind if I check," I said. Noah looked between us, confusion and hurt twisting across his face. "Patrick, what does he have to do with this?" Cassandra turned to him, trying to regain control. "He's just a business partner. Evelyn is making things up because she's bitter and lonely." "Careful," I said calmly. "I've been called worse by better people." The room fell silent again. Cassandra's composure cracked just long enough for me to see the fear behind her perfect posture. She snatched her bag off the table and stormed out. Margaret stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "You always think confrontation solves everything," she muttered, and followed Cassandra outside. Noah sat there, head in his hands. "Why did she do this?" "I gave her everything." I took a deep breath. "You gave her love. She wanted power. Some people don't know the difference." He didn't respond, but his silence said enough. Later that day, I called an old contact from my JAG days, Marcus Hale. He'd worked intel before retiring, and if anyone could dig quietly, it was him. He picked up on the third ring. Well, if it isn't the Iron Lady herself, what's got you calling the old warhorse?" "Need a favor," I said. "You still have friends who know how to trace bank transfers?" He chuckled. "That depends on whether you're paying in cash or whiskey." "I'll send both if this pans out," I said. I filled him in the fake affection, the sudden divorce filing, the suspicious name Patrick Lowell. I could almost hear him scribbling notes. Lowell, he murmured. "Yeah, that name rings a bell. Guy's been tied to multiple fraud investigations, usually fronting through shell companies. If you're Cassandra's mixed up with him, she's playing with fire." "She doesn't play with fire," I said. "She sells the matches." Marcus laughed, low and rough. "I'll see what I can find." When I hung up, I felt that old familiar clarity I hadn't felt since the service, the one that comes when you stop reacting and start planning. That evening, I walked past Lily's room. The door was cracked open. I heard her small voice. "Mom, I don't want to go," she was saying softly. "You'll do what I say," Cassandra replied, her tone sharp. "When the judge asks you, You'll tell him you want to live with me. Understand? Lily sniffled. But Daddy… Enough, Cassandra hissed. You'll thank me one day. I froze outside the door, every instinct in me screaming to step in. But I stayed quiet. I needed evidence, not emotion. When I returned to my room, I sat on the bed and stared at the file I'd started building screenshots, copies of bills, even the receipt for that hotel she claimed was a work conference. It wasn't much yet, but it was something. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. Marcus again. You were right, he said without preamble. Lowell's been wiring money to an account under Cassandra Blake's maiden name for months. Luxury expenses, travel, restaurants, none of it cheap. My jaw tightened. Can you send me copies? They're on their way, he said. You planning to confront her? Not yet, I said. I'm planning to destroy her legally. I spent the rest of the night printing, sorting, and highlighting. Every document was another nail in Cassandra's coffin. Just past midnight, Noah knocked on my door. He looked exhausted, but there was something new in his eyes, anger. I saw her phone, he said quietly. Messages from that guy. You were right. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry, kid. He sank into the chair across from me. What do I do now? You let me handle it, I said, but from now on you don't trust her, not even with a glass of water. He managed a weak smile. You really think you can fix this? I looked at the growing pile of evidence on my desk. I don't fix people like her, Noah. I expose them. The house was silent again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like the calm before a very necessary storm. And I'd spent my whole life learning how to fight through storms. The next morning, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Cassandra had left early again, perfume still clinging to the hallway like a warning sign. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, scrolling through the photos Marcus had sent overnight. The timestamps, hotel receipts, bank transfers, every line confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't just cheating. She was building her escape plan with stolen money. Noah limped in, his face pale. She took Lily to school and said she's meeting her lawyer afterward. Her lawyer? I asked, looking up. He nodded. She said they're just going over paperwork. I slid my laptop toward him. You might want to see what kind of paperwork she's been working on. He hesitated before looking. His eyes moved across the photos Cassandra with Patrick Lowell in a hotel lobby, the credit card statements, the transfers. His lips parted, but no sound came out. She told me she was helping her cousin start a business, he said softly. Yeah, I said. A business in luxury dining and weekend getaways. He pushed the laptop away, his shoulders slumping. God, I'm such an idiot. No, I said. You're just someone who believed in the wrong person. Happens to everyone. What matters is what you do next. He gave a bitter laugh. Next? I can barely walk without a crutch, and I'm supposed to fight her in court? She's got money, lawyers, and her parents feeding her every move. I leaned forward. You've got me, and I don't lose to people like her. Noah stared at me for a long moment before nodding. The kind of nod soldiers give when they realize they're not retreating anymore. When he left the kitchen, I called Marcus again. I need more than pictures. I need something that'll hold up in court, he grunted. You asking for legal-grade evidence or moral satisfaction? Both, I said. Well, he said. Lucky for you, I've still got friends in cyber forensics. Give me a day, maybe less. Benoon. He'd already sent a new file. Inside were recorded phone calls, Cassandra's voice, clear as glass, talking to Lowell about finalizing transfers before the court hearing. Her tone was casual, almost bored, like someone planning a vacation. Then came the part that made my stomach twist. Lowell's voice. You sure the kid'll say what you need her to? Cassandra laughed softly. Don't worry. I've got that handled. She knows what to say. I paused the recording. That was it. That was the line that crossed from betrayal to abuse. She was coaching her daughter to lie in court, manipulating an 8-year-old for leverage. By the time Noah came back downstairs, I already had the printer running. Pages filled the table like war maps. He stared at the evidence, his expression unreadable. You really think this is enough? It's not about what I think, I said. It's about what a judge can't ignore. He looked up at me slowly. You really were a legend in the Corps, weren't you? I shrugged. I was good at my job. Turns out, I'm still good at it. We spent the rest of the day gathering what I called confirmation material. Old receipts, phone bills, tax records, anything that would paint the picture of Cassandra's double life. I even found a folder tucked behind a cabinet labeled House Maintenance. Inside were fake invoices for repairs that never happened, thousands of dollars paid to a construction company registered to Patrick Lowell. I let out a low whistle. Subtle as a grenade, I muttered. By late afternoon, I drove to see Marcus in person. His office looked like something out of a Cold War movie, dim lighting, half-broken blinds, a smell of stale coffee, and secrets. He looked up from his desk. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I said, "and neither has she, hopefully." He handed me a folder thicker than the last one. "That's everything. Digital trail, financials, emails. Oh, and you'll love this part. Lowell's company has 3 fake defense contracts under investigation by the federal auditor's office." "Extra." I raised an eyebrow. "Defense contracts?" He nodded. "Your favorite kind of scumbag. Steals taxpayer money, launders it through shell firms, hides behind corporate lawyers." Meaning Cassandra isn't just sleeping with a fraud. She's aiding one. Marcus leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Now you're getting the picture." I flipped through the papers, each document adding another nail in her coffin. "Can I use this?" "Depends," he said. "You still know how to make a courtroom flinch?" I smiled. "Guess we'll find out." On my way back, I stopped by the school to pick up Lily. Cassandra had apparently forgotten to show up again. The teacher looked relieved when I offered to take her. In the car, Lily sat quietly, tracing circles on the fogged-up window. "You okay, kiddo?" I asked. She nodded, but her voice was small. "Mom said Daddy's sick and can't take care of me. Is that true?" My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "No, sweetheart. Your daddy's not sick. He's just been hurt, and he's healing. Big difference." She looked at me, eyes bright and unsure. "Mom said I have to tell the judge I don't want to live with Daddy." I swallowed hard. "And what do you want?" She hesitated. "I want to stay with Daddy, and you." I smiled, though it felt heavy. "Then you tell the truth, okay? Always. The truth's stronger than anything else." She nodded and went back to drawing on the window. When we got home, Cassandra's car was already in the driveway. She was standing on the porch, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "Where have you been?" she snapped the second I opened the door. "Picking up your daughter," I said evenly. "Since you didn't." She sneered. "Don't act like a hero, Evelyn. You're a guest here. Then maybe start treating this like a home instead of a crime scene." Her face tightened. "You think you're clever? You're just an old woman playing detective? When this divorce is over, you'll be out of here too." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You can keep pretending you're in control, Cassandra, but the truth has a nasty habit of showing up uninvited." She flinched just slightly, then turned and slammed the door behind her. That night, I called Marcus one more time. "I need this evidence secured, chain of custody intact," I said. "We're taking it to court." He laughed. "So it's official? You're back in the game?" "Not by choice," I said, "but someone has to remind people what justice looks like." After the call, I stared at the file on my desk. Every document, every recording, every little piece of proof, it all added up to one simple truth. Cassandra had underestimated me, and in my experience, that was the last mistake people ever made. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. Lily's laughter drifted faintly down the hallway, soft, hopeful, like the sound of something still pure in the middle of the wreckage. For the first time in a long while, I didn't just feel angry. I felt focused, the kind of focus that wins wars. And this house, for better or worse, had just become my battlefield. The courthouse smelled like old wood and stale air, the kind of place where truth either rose like smoke or got buried under paperwork. I'd been here before, decades ago, standing tall in uniform, defending soldiers who made bad decisions under worse circumstances. But this time wasn't about medals or rules of engagement. This was family. Noah's hand trembled slightly as he leaned on his cane beside me. The morning light caught the scars across his knuckles, reminders of both the accident and the years of work that had built that house brick by brick. Cassandra stood across the hallway, perfectly dressed, lips glossed, looking like she was about to give a TED Talk on how to ruin someone gracefully. Margaret stood beside her. My sister. The sight of her there on Cassandra's side hit harder than I expected. She wouldn't look at me, and that told me everything. "Don't let her get to you," I said quietly to Noah. "She feeds on reaction." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. When the bailiff called our case, we entered the courtroom. Judge Raymond Carter sat at the bench, stern and composed, scanning the room the way a sniper surveys a field. The years had silvered his hair, but I recognized him instantly. We'd worked together once, back when he was a young prosecutor, and I was the officer who saved his case from collapse. As we took our seats, his gaze landed on me. His brow furrowed. I saw the exact second recognition hit. The same look I'd seen on soldiers who spotted their commanding officer in civilian clothes, a flash of respect, surprise, and caution all at once. "Mr. and Mrs. Shaw," he said, his voice low and formal, "we're here to begin the preliminary hearing regarding custody and division of assets. Counsel, please proceed." Cassandra's attorney, a man who looked more like a politician than a lawyer, stood up first. "Your Honor, my client seeks a fair division of marital property, as well as primary custody of her daughter due to her husband's limited physical and financial capacity." Limited capacity. The words landed like a slap. I glanced at Noah. His shoulders were squared, but his eyes flickered downward, the look of a man who'd been told too many times that he wasn't enough. When it was our turn, Noah's attorney, the one Cassandra's cousin had arranged, stumbled through an unconvincing argument that sounded more like a surrender than a defense. I'd had enough. I stood up. The room turned. The lawyer froze. Judge Carter adjusted his glasses, his eyes narrowing. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "with all due respect, this man no longer represents my nephew. Effective immediately, I will serve as his legal counsel." End quote. The lawyer started to protest, but Carter raised a hand. "And you are?" I met his eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Evelyn Shaw, U.S. Army JAG Corps, retired." The murmur that rippled through the courtroom was instant. Cassandra's attorney blinked. Cassandra herself stiffened, her fake confidence cracking. Judge Carter leaned back, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he said, "I'll admit, I didn't expect to see you again, Colonel." "Neither did I, Your Honor," I said, "but I go where I'm needed." He nodded slowly, tapping his gavel once. "Proceed." I walked to the front table, placing my worn leather briefcase on the wood, the same one I'd carried through trials that decided men's futures. The sound it made when it hit the surface was sharp, deliberate like a gun being cocked. "Let's start with the term limited capacity," I said, turning to Cassandra's lawyer. "Would you like to clarify what exactly makes my nephew, a decorated veteran and homeowner, incapable of being a father?" He cleared his throat. "The injury sustained has prevented him from maintaining gainful employment and providing the—" "Incorrect," I interrupted. "He receives veterans' compensation, which exceeds state median income. He also owns his home outright. Or, would you prefer I present the title deed proving that?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Cassandra's jaw clenched. Judge Carter raised an eyebrow, glancing toward me. "Colonel Shaw, I trust you have supporting documentation?" I slid a file across the table. "Always." He reviewed it briefly, nodding. "Admissible." Cassandra's lawyer tried to pivot, talking about emotional stability and household environment. I waited until he said the words child welfare before cutting in again. "Speaking of the child," I said, "may I remind the court that manipulating a minor's testimony is considered coercion under state law?" The lawyer froze. Cassandra's eyes widened just enough to confirm everything. Judge Carter looked up sharply. "Is there an allegation of coercion?" I held up a flash drive. "There's more than an allegation." I could feel every heartbeat in that room when the audio began to play. Cassandra's voice filled the air, smooth and cruel. "Lily, if you want Mommy to be happy, you'll tell the judge you don't want to live with Daddy, okay?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Cassandra stood up. "That's taken out of context." "Of course it is," I said dryly. "The context being your plan to use an 8-year-old as a bargaining chip." The gavel came down hard. "Order," Judge Carter said. His voice had a new edge to it now, one that carried more than authority. It carried disgust. Cassandra sat slowly, her knuckles white on the table. Margaret stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I looked at Noah, whose face was pale but steady. His lips twitched, almost into a smile. For the first time, He looked like he believed this wasn't hopeless. When the judge called for a brief recess, Cassandra's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She whispered back through gritted teeth, and I could practically read the words, "Fix it." Margaret followed her into the hallway, her face flushed. I stayed seated, calmly gathering my papers, but my hands itched. Noah turned to me quietly. "You really think we can win this?" I looked straight ahead. "I don't think, Noah. I prepare." From across the room, Judge Carter watched me with a knowing expression. As he rose from the bench, he leaned slightly closer and said just loud enough for me to hear, "Still fighting for justice, I see." "Always," I replied. Outside, the corridor buzzed with murmurs. Cassandra was pacing near the vending machines, her hands flying as she argued with Margaret. I didn't bother getting close enough to listen. I didn't need to. Every con artist sounds the same when their plan starts to fall apart fast, frantic, and desperate. Back in the courtroom, the recess clock ticked down. Noah sat quietly beside me, fidgeting with his cane. I watched the second hand crawl, feeling that familiar mix of adrenaline and clarity I used to get before cross-examinations in military court. Because this wasn't just about defending him anymore. It was about dismantling the lies, one document, one word, one truth at a time. When the bailiff announced, "Court will resume in 5 minutes," I rose, straightened my jacket, and looked at Noah. "Ready?" I asked. He took a slow breath and nodded. "Let's finish what she started." End of town. The courthouse cafeteria smelled like burnt coffee and frustration. I sat across from Judge Carter, who'd asked me to stay behind for an informal chat. That phrase always meant one of two things: a warning or a confession. He stirred his coffee slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "You haven't changed much, Colonel," he said. "Still have that same look, the one that made defense attorneys flinch." I cracked a faint smile. "And you still have that tone that makes witnesses confess." End quote. He chuckled quietly, then sighed. "You walked in there today like you'd been waiting years for that moment." "Maybe I have," I said. "Justice has been my only consistent relationship." He nodded, expression softening. "When I heard your name, I thought it couldn't be the same Evelyn Shaw who saved my career in Kandahar. But here you are, fighting another kind of war. Different battlefield," I said. "Same principles." He leaned back, folding his hands. "You always did believe in principles, sometimes too much." "Too much?" I raised an eyebrow. "You don't bend, Evelyn," he said. "You break people who lie, and you don't stop until there's nothing left of them. That's admirable in uniform. But out here?" He gestured vaguely toward the courtroom doors. "People bleed slower." I looked him dead in the eye. "So do the liars." He smiled a little sadly. "I didn't say you were wrong." He paused, then added, "Your sister Margaret, she looked like she was carrying more than loyalty in that courtroom." "She's carrying guilt," I said. "And she doesn't even know it yet." He studied me for a moment. "Just be careful. Family battles don't end with verdicts." I picked up my bag. Neither do wars. When I stepped outside, the air was heavy, clouds rolling over the Texas sky like old memories refusing to fade. Margaret was leaning against her car, arms crossed, eyes glassy. "You really enjoy humiliating me in public, don't you?" she snapped as soon as I approached. "I didn't humiliate you, Margaret," I said calmly. "You did that yourself when you chose the wrong side." She scoffed. "There you go again, judge, jury, and executioner. You think just because you wore that uniform, you're the only one who knows what's right." "No," I said. "I just don't confuse comfort with morality." She pushed off the car. "You never change. Always the hero. Always the one who thinks she's saving everyone." "Someone has to," I said. Margaret's voice cracked. "You don't even know half the story." "Then tell me," I said. "Because so far all I've seen is you defending a woman who's destroying your nephew." She hesitated, looking away. "You think this is just about Cassandra? You have no idea what she knows, what she's holding over me." I stepped closer. "Then it's time you start talking." But she didn't. She got into her car, slammed the door, and drove off, tires squealing. The smell of burned rubber lingered longer than her courage. That night, back at the house, the silence felt thicker than usual. Noah sat on the porch, staring at the horizon. Cassandra hadn't come home yet, which was probably the first good thing she'd done all week. "She's talking to Lowell again," he said without looking at me. I nodded. I figured. He let out a bitter laugh. You ever notice how people like her always land on their feet? Only until someone kicks the ground out from under them, I said. He smiled faintly, but there was pain behind it. You sound like you've done this before. I have, I said. Too many times. He turned to me. You ever regret it? All the fights? The sacrifices? I thought about it, the faces, the cases. The endless cycle of defending the truth until it bled. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember the alternative, letting the wrong people win. He nodded slowly. Guess that's something we have in common. Later, as the sun dipped below the trees, I saw Margaret's car pull into the driveway. She didn't get out right away. When she finally did, she looked different. Smaller, older, like something inside her had cracked. She walked straight past me, into the house, and stopped in the hallway. We need to talk, she said. I followed her into the kitchen. She sat down, fingers twisting around a napkin. You were right about Cassandra. She's been lying to all of us. But she's not the only one. I folded my arms. Go on. She took a shaky breath. Patrick Lowell, I introduced her to him. Years ago. I didn't know who he really was. He offered me investment advice, said he could help pay off my mortgage. I signed a few papers, and somehow my name ended up on a company account tied to his. I exhaled slowly. So Cassandra's blackmailing you. Men. Margaret nodded. She said if I didn't help her with the divorce, she'd tell the feds I was part of his scheme. I was terrified. I still am. For the first time in a long time, I felt something almost like pity for her. You should have told me, I said quietly. I thought you'd judge me, she whispered. You always do. I shook my head. No, Margaret. I judge choices, not people. And right now you've got a chance to make the right one. She looked up, eyes wet. You really think it's not too late? It's never too late to stop being useful to a criminal, I said. She let out a shaky laugh. You make everything sound so simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, I said. I stood, pouring her a glass of water. I need everything you've got on Lowell. Emails, bank records, anything. She hesitated. You're not going to turn me in? Not unless you make me, I said. But if you want redemption, start by helping me bring them down. Margaret nodded slowly. Okay, I'll get what I can. As she left the room, Noah appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of confusion and relief. Did I just hear what I think I did? He asked. Yeah, I said. Turns out betrayal runs in the family. He leaned against the doorframe. You still think we can win? I smirked. We're not trying to win, Noah. We're trying to end this. Outside, headlights cut across the window, Cassandra's car pulling up again. Voices carried from the driveway, hers and Patrick's, sharp and hurried. I stepped quietly to the porch, staying in the shadows. You said she wouldn't find out, Cassandra hissed. Patrick's voice was low, annoyed. Relax. The feds have bigger fish to fry. Bigger fish? She snapped. If her military friends dig deeper, we're both screwed. He grabbed her arm. Then make her back off. I felt the chill crawl up my spine. Margaret's fear, Cassandra's manipulation, Lowell's arrogance, it all fit together now. They weren't just greedy. They were reckless. And reckless people always left trails. I stepped back inside, closing the door softly behind me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Noah looked at me. Everything okay? Not yet, I said, but it's about to be. The wind outside rattled the windows again. This time, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like change. Margaret's confession still echoed in my head as I sat alone in the living room, the glow from the desk lamp cutting sharp lines across the pile of evidence on the table. The whole house was silent except for the occasional creak of wood under stress, like it was listening too. Somewhere down the hall, Noah slept restlessly, the weight of betrayal still sitting heavy on him. I could hear faint murmurs, his nightmares always found him before dawn. When the sun broke through the blinds, it hit the documents in front of me. Emails, bank trails, recordings, affidavits. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was stacked in plain sight, waiting for daylight. Cassandra and Lowell had built their empire on fraud and blackmail, and now it was starting to collapse under its own weight. By mid-morning, Margaret handed me a small flash drive. Her hands trembled when she spoke. It's everything I could find. Emails between Cassandra and Lowell. Some of them mention me. but I didn't reply to most. I took it gently. You did the right thing, Margaret. Her voice cracked. Maybe a decade too late. Timing's overrated, I said. Truth doesn't expire. Marcus called soon after. You're gonna love this, he said. Lowell's company just got flagged for a federal audit. They're under investigation for fraud in 2 states. He smiled. Perfect timing. He laughed. Don't tell me you're about to drop that bomb in open court. I don't drop bombs, I said. I present facts. At the courthouse, the air felt electric. Cassandra strutted in wearing navy blue, like she was trying to cosplay credibility. Patrick wasn't with her, probably too busy shredding evidence somewhere. Margaret followed behind, pallid but steady, avoiding Cassandra's eyes. Noah sat beside me, straight-backed, his crutch leaning against the table. He wasn't broken anymore, just scarred, and scars are proof of survival. Judge Carter entered, and the room went silent. We'll resume proceedings, he said evenly. Colonel Shaw, I understand you have additional evidence to submit. I stood, sliding a folder across the table. Yes, Your Honor. Financial records linking Cassandra Blake and Patrick Lowell to ongoing fraud investigations. Transfers made using corporate accounts disguised as property maintenance. Additionally, I held up the flash drive recorded conversations confirming their intent to manipulate testimony from a minor. Cassandra's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection! None of this has been authenticated. I turned calmly. Actually, it has. Verified through federal database cross-matching here are the certifications. The judge reviewed the documents. Expression tightening. Objection overruled. Cassandra's face drained of color. For once, her perfect posture wilted. Noah sat frozen, watching the walls close in around the woman who'd once called herself his wife. I could feel his breath shaking beside me, but I didn't look away from Cassandra. Predators hate when you stare back. Mrs. Blake, Judge Carter said, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Her voice cracked. This is a smear campaign. She pointed at me. She's twisting everything. I didn't move. You twisted enough on your own, Cassandra. I'm just straightening it out. That. Judge Carter turned to the bailiff. Play the recording, please. The room filled with Cassandra's voice, first calm, then sharp, commanding. Make sure the kid says she wants to live with me. If she hesitates, remind her what happens when Daddy gets upset. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Noah shut his eyes, jaw clenched. When the audio ended, the silence was suffocating. Judge Carter's tone was low, steady, and dangerous. Mrs. Blake, you're aware that coercing a minor constitutes witness tampering? Cassandra started shaking her head. That's not what it sounds like. It's exactly what it sounds like. I cut in. Her lawyer tried to intervene, muttering about misunderstandings, but Carter raised a hand. Enough. He looked back at me. Colonel Shaw, I believe you have additional exhibits? I nodded and handed over the last folder. Bank statements, wire transfers, property deeds, all signed by Cassandra Blake and linked to Lowell's shell accounts. And this, I added, holding up one page, is an internal email from Lowell's company threatening to expose her sister-in-law unless she cooperated. Margaret flinched, but I kept my voice level. Mrs. Blake used fear to control everyone around her, including her own family. That's not instability. That's strategy. Cassandra's mask finally cracked. She stood abruptly, her voice rising. You think you're a hero, Evelyn? You ruined this family. You turned my daughter against me. I stared at her, unblinking. You did that all by yourself. The judge's gavel slammed down. Sit down, Mrs. Blake. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but she brushed him off. No, you think I'm the villain, but I did what I had to do. You don't know what it's like to lose control, to be ignored. Judge Carter's tone sharpened. Mrs. Blake, that's enough. She kept going, voice cracking. He was never the same after the accident. He just sat there, pathetic, useless, and I had to carry everything. I deserved more. Noah's hand tightened around his cane. For a second, I thought he might speak, but he didn't have to. Every word she said was burying her deeper. The judge looked at her with something that wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Mrs. Blake, this court is not here to reward selfishness. It's here to determine the truth. And the truth, as presented, is damning. He turned to me. Colonel Shaw, thank you for your diligence. I gave a small nod. Just doing my job, Your Honor. When the recess was called, the room buzzed with tension. Cassandra stormed out, heels clattering down the hall. Margaret stayed seated, her face pale and wet with silent tears. Noah leaned toward me, voice low. You think she'll actually face charges? Not yet, I said, but she's just handed them the rope. He exhaled, almost laughing from disbelief. I never thought I'd see her lose control. People like her always do, I said. Eventually, the truth stops asking for permission. As we left the courtroom, I noticed Judge Carter watching us. He gave a subtle nod, half gratitude, half respect. I nodded back. Outside, the sun hit hard, reflecting off the courthouse steps. Noah paused halfway down, gripping the railing. You think we're really free of her? I looked out at the parking lot where Cassandra stood screaming into her phone. Freedom's a process, I said, but she just started ours for us. He managed a small smile. You make it sound so easy. It's never easy, I said. It's just worth it. Margaret joined us quietly, standing a few steps behind. Her voice was hoarse. Evelyn, thank you. I didn't answer right away. Gratitude felt too light for what just happened. Don't thank me yet, I said finally. We still have cleanup to do. The courthouse doors closed behind us, their heavy echo fading into the hum of traffic. Somewhere inside, the system that had once failed too many good people had just worked the way it should. And for once, that felt like enough. The courthouse emptied slower than usual that afternoon. Reporters hovered near the doors, sniffing for a headline, while Cassandra paced outside like a cornered animal pretending she still had claws. Margaret kept her distance, her eyes red, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets as if trying to hide everything they'd touched. Noah and I walked out quietly, the heat from the pavement rippling in the air. He didn't say much, just gripped his cane tighter and looked straight ahead. I knew that look the same one soldiers wore when they finally realized the war was winnable. By the time we reached the car, Cassandra's voice cut through the noise behind us. You think this is over, Evelyn? You can't destroy me. I turned slowly. You're doing a fine job of that yourself. Her face twisted, rage mixing with fear. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I stepped closer. Neither did Patrick Lowell, apparently. I'd be careful calling him, the feds might answer instead. That shut her up. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not fury, but panic. It didn't suit her. When I got home later, the phone was already ringing. Marcus's voice came through, low and steady. Your favorite fraudster's on the run. Lowell cleaned out one last account this morning and disappeared. Cassandra with him? I asked. No. She's too busy playing victim on social media. But the feds are circling. Wouldn't be surprised if they knock on her door next. I leaned against the wall, exhaling. She's going to drag everyone down with her. That's the thing about liars, Marcus said. They always think they can control gravity on the way down. He hung up, and for a long minute, I just stood there in the quiet house, listening to the ticking clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard movement. Margaret in the kitchen, flipping through the stack of papers I'd left. She looked up when I entered. They're really going to investigate her? They already are, I said. You should be ready for questions too. Her hands trembled. I told you everything I know. I believe you, I said. But you need to stop protecting her, even in your head. She used you, Margaret. Same way she used Noah. Same way she used Lily. The sooner you face that, the sooner this ends. That. She nodded slowly, her shoulders collapsing under the weight of it. You're right. The doorbell rang before I could say more. It was a sheriff's deputy, a tall man with a polite voice and tired eyes. Ma'am, he said, we're looking for Cassandra Blake. We have a warrant for her arrest. I didn't flinch. She's not here, he nodded. We'll find her. Just wanted to let you know she's officially being charged with fraud and witness tampering. Margaret gasped softly behind me. The deputy tipped his hat and left. I closed the door, turning to her. There's your justice. Margaret sat down, staring at nothing. You think she'll actually go to prison? If there's any fairness left in this state, yes. Later that night, the local news broke the story, defense contractor's wife implicated in fraud scheme. Cassandra's photo filled the screen, her perfect smile now frozen under the headline of disgrace. Noah sat watching in silence, the glow from the TV flickering across his face. When the reporter mentioned Lowell's disappearance, he muttered, "I hope they find him." "They will," I said. "Guys like him always think they're smarter than the system. They forget who built the system." Noah smirked faintly. "Sounds like something you'd tell a new recruit." "Maybe I would," I said. "And maybe I'd remind them you can't hide forever from the truth." Margaret walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I still can't believe it's really over." "It's not over," I said. "It's just quieter." The 3 of us sat there, listening to the news replay the same story over and over, as if repetition made justice real. The next morning, I drove out to see Judge Carter. His office was tucked behind the courthouse, filled with books, certificates, and that faint smell of law and old leather. He looked up when I walked in. "Colonel Shaw," he said, smiling faintly. "I had a feeling you'd stop by." "Old habits die hard," I said. He gestured for me to sit. "Cassandra Blake's case is going to trial. Between your evidence and the federal investigation, she won't be walking away from this." "I didn't do it for her," I said. "I did it for Noah and for Lily." He nodded. "And for yourself, maybe?" I hesitated, then met his gaze. "Maybe a little." He leaned forward. "You know, you always had that look in your eye, the one that says you're never really done fighting." I smiled faintly. Someone has to keep the balance. As I left his office, I passed the hallway where Cassandra's hearing had taken place. The benches were empty now, sunlight cutting across the wood. For the first time, the place felt less like a battlefield and more like a graveyard, a resting place for lies. Back home, Noah was in the garage, tinkering with his old motorcycle. The sound of tools clicking filled the air. It was the first time I'd seen him working on something that wasn't survival. "How's it running?" I asked. He grinned. "Better than me some days." I laughed. "Give it time. Machines are honest. They only break when you push them too hard." He paused, looking up. "That's supposed to be about me? Or the bike?" "Both," I said. Margaret joined us a few minutes later, holding a small box. She handed it to Noah. Inside was an old photo of him as a kid, sitting on his father's shoulders, the 3 of them smiling under a summer sky. "I found it when I was cleaning out Mom's attic," she said quietly. "Figured you should have it." Noah stared at it for a long time, then nodded. "Thanks, Aunt Margaret." It was a small moment, but it mattered. Sometimes healing doesn't roar, it just exhales. As evening fell, the phone rang again. Marcus's voice came through, rough but satisfied. They caught Lowell. Airport in Phoenix, trying to board a flight under a fake name. "Guess gravity caught up with him," I said. "Guess it did," he replied. "You did good, Ev. Real good." I hung up, stepping out onto the porch. The sun was sinking, painting the yard in amber light. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive again. Lily ran across the grass, chasing the neighbor's dog, her laughter carrying through the air. Noah leaned against the porch railing, watching her, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Margaret stood in the doorway, quieter now, her face lined with regret but lighter than before. And me, I just stood there, breathing in the calm. Justice had done its job. But peace, that was the real victory. The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet it used to be. It wasn't heavy or tense. It was the sound of peace finally starting to breathe. The air didn't feel like it was holding secrets anymore, just the low hum of life coming back. Noah had started spending more time outside. His limp was still there, but it didn't define him the way it used to. He'd even started fixing the fence out, back the one that had been leaning for months. Watching him hammer nails into the wood, I could almost see the old version of him returning piece by piece. Lily sat nearby on the steps, drawing in a notebook. Every so often, she'd look up and say something like, "Daddy, it's crooked," or "Grandma says you hit like a turtle." And he'd laugh a real laugh, not the hollow kind he'd had before. Margaret had been around too, quieter than before but softer. The kind of softness that comes from exhaustion and acceptance. She cooked dinner most nights now, her way of saying sorry without saying the word. I didn't make her. Guilt was a heavy enough burden. I wasn't going to add mine to it. It was one of those evenings where everything felt almost normal. The smell of roast chicken filled the kitchen. Lily set the table, humming a tune from school. Margaret wiped her hands on a towel and looked over at me. It feels strange, she said. What does? I asked. This, she said, motioning around the room. The calm. I keep waiting for someone to start yelling. I smiled faintly. That's trauma talking. You'll get used to it. She gave a small laugh, but it was honest. You always know what to say, don't you? Not always, I said, just when people need to hear it. Dinner was simple but good. No tension, no second-guessing every word. Lily kept telling stories about her teacher's dog, and Noah chimed in with jokes about military food that made her giggle. For the first time, the laughter didn't feel borrowed. Afterward, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cooler than usual, and the smell of rain hung in the distance. Margaret joined me, holding 2 glasses of wine. You still don't drink, huh? She asked, handing me one. I shook my head. Not since deployment. Learned that mixing alcohol with bad memories is a bad strategy. She took a slow sip. You ever wish you didn't come back? I looked out across the yard. Not once. Even when it hurt. She nodded, eyes glistening. You were right about Cassandra. About everything. I wanted to believe she cared about him. Oh, you wanted to believe someone could be better than they were, I said. That's not weakness, Margaret. That's hope. It's what makes you human. She looked down at her glass. And what makes you? I smiled. A work in progress. The sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. A black sedan pulled into the driveway, headlights slicing through the dusk. Noah stepped out onto the porch beside me, his hand instinctively tensing around his cane. A man in a dark suit got out, flashing a badge. Evening, I'm Agent Morris with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Are you Lieutenant Colonel Evelyn Shaw? I nodded. Retired. What can I do for you? He stepped forward, professional but polite. We wanted to inform you that Cassandra Blake has agreed to cooperate with the federal case against Patrick Lowell. She's providing testimony and documentation in exchange for a plea deal. Noah's jaw tightened. So she's walking away? Morris shook his head. Not exactly. She'll serve time, but less than Lowell. Her information helped us freeze over $3 million in fraudulent accounts. Margaret looked relieved and guilty all at once. So that's it? For now, Morris said. The court will schedule sentencing next month. You'll be notified. He nodded politely and left, the sound of the car fading down the road. Noah exhaled slowly. She gets to make a deal after everything she did? I looked at him. Sometimes justice is messy, but the truth is out and she's finally facing it. That's what matters. He nodded reluctantly. Guess I'll take it. Later that night, Lily crept into the living room in her pajamas, clutching that same stuffed rabbit she'd had through the worst of it. She climbed up beside me on the couch, quiet for a while before asking, Grandma says bad people go to jail. Is Mommy bad? I felt the question land heavy in the air. Your mom made a lot of bad choices, I said carefully. But she's still your mom, and maybe one day she'll learn from them. Lily frowned. Are you mad at her? I looked down at her small face, so full of confusion and hope. No, sweetheart. I don't waste anger on people who already lost themselves. She nodded like she understood more than she should have and leaned her head on my shoulder. You're not like her. I smiled faintly. That's the goal. She fell asleep a few minutes later, the rhythm of her breathing soft and steady. I carried her to her room, tucking her in beside the small nightlight that glowed like a promise. When I returned to the porch, Noah was still out there, staring up at the sky. You ever wonder why people do what they do? He asked. Every day, I said. But I've learned not to chase the answer. People are built from choices, not reasons. He nodded slowly. I used to think strength meant not needing anyone. Turns out, it's the opposite. That's one lesson worth keeping, I said. He turned toward me. I don't know how to thank you, Aunt Ev, for everything. I shook my head. Don't thank me. Just live right. That's how you pay it forward. He smiled, a tired but genuine one. You ever think you missed your calling? You could have been a preacher. I'd get fired on day one, I said. Too many footnotes. We laughed quietly. The night air settled, still and calm. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, soft and low, like the sky itself was exhaling. Inside, Margaret was on the phone, her voice low but calm. She was talking to someone from the bank, arranging to close the last of Cassandra's joint accounts. It wasn't revenge. It was cleanup. The kind that made peace stick. As the night went on, I sat on the porch and let the weight of everything finally settle. The lies, the anger, the years of silence, all of it had led here. To this quiet house that finally felt like home again. Lily's laughter from earlier still echoed faintly in my head. Margaret's words, Noah's quiet resilience, they all braided together into something that felt like redemption. Justice had done its job, but family honor, that had to be rebuilt. Brick by brick. And for once I knew we had enough left to do it. The morning light came through the curtains soft and clean, the kind that feels like forgiveness. The air smelled of rain and paper, the courthouse kind. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my jacket. Not a military uniform anymore, but it still felt like armor. My reflection stared back, older, steadier, but far from tired. Today wasn't about battle. It was about closure. Noah came down the stairs wearing a pressed shirt and that quiet determination that had replaced his grief. Lily followed behind him, holding the small stuffed rabbit she refused to leave at home. Margaret was last, her hair pinned back neatly, her face calm but pale. We looked like a family heading to church, but our faith was in something different truth. The courthouse in Austin was busy that morning, reporters waiting by the steps again. Their cameras turned as we approached, but this time, no one flinched. There was no scandal to hide, no secret to bury, just a family walking toward the end of something that had nearly destroyed them. Judge Carter's courtroom was packed, the kind of full that hums with curiosity and sympathy. Cassandra was already there, sitting beside her public defender. Her hair was pulled back tight, her face blank. The arrogance was gone. The fight was gone. What was left was just a person stripped down to consequence. Noah took his seat beside me. He didn't look at her. Not once. Lily sat with Margaret in the front row, clutching her rabbit tight. When the judge entered, everyone rose. His voice carried the same weight it always had, calm but firm. This court will now deliver sentencing in the matter of the state versus Cassandra Blake and Patrick Lowell. Lowell wasn't there, he'd already been sentenced to 15 years for federal fraud. Cassandra's part was smaller, but her damage cut closer to the heart. Mrs. Blake, Judge Carter began, after review of all testimony and evidence, including your cooperation with federal authorities, this court finds you guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and attempted witness tampering. Her eyes flickered a twitch of pride trying to survive. You will serve 3 years in state prison, Carter continued. Upon release, you will be on probation for 5 years and stripped of custodial rights to your minor child. Although the room stayed silent, Cassandra's hands clenched, then loosened. She didn't cry, she didn't protest. She just nodded once, a small movement that carried the weight of defeat. When the judge finished, he looked over at me. His expression softened. Colonel Shaw, I'd like to commend your integrity and perseverance in seeking justice. It's not often I see the law handled with both precision and compassion. I inclined my head. Justice doesn't wear a uniform, Your Honor. It just needs someone willing to stand for it. A faint smile touched his lips. Well said. The gavel came down, sharp and final. Cassandra was escorted out quietly, no scene, no shouting, just the quiet shuffle of shoes on linoleum. Margaret turned away, covering her face. I placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't need words. Outside, the reporters swarmed. Microphones flashing, voices overlapping. Colonel Shaw, how does it feel to win? Was this personal? Do you believe justice was served? I raised a hand and said simply, justice isn't about winning, it's about setting things right. Then I guided Noah and Lily through the crowd until we reached the car. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. The tension that used to live between us was gone. Lily was the first to break the silence. Daddy, is Mommy going to say sorry? Noah looked at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes kind but steady. Maybe one day, sweetheart, but we don't wait for people to say sorry to move on. She nodded like that made perfect sense and went back to hugging her rabbit. At home, the house felt different. Sunlight spilled across the living room floor, and for once, it didn't feel like it was shining on ghosts. Margaret started lunch, humming a tune I didn't recognize. Noah changed into his old jeans and went out back to fix the porch swing. Lily followed him, her small hands holding nails he didn't really need help with. I sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window. The orange tree was blooming again, small white flowers pushing through the green. Funny how nature doesn't wait for people to heal, it just keeps moving. Marcus dropped by in the afternoon, unannounced as always. "You clean up nice for a war hero," he said, leaning on the doorframe with that crooked grin. "Some of us retire gracefully," I said. "Graceful isn't the word I'd use," he smirked, then looked around. "Place feels different. It's finally ours again." He nodded, his tone softening. "You did good, Ev. You always do." I raised an eyebrow. "Even when I broke your nose that one time?" He grinned wider. "Especially then." Noah came in from the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. "Marcus, you still owe me a beer for that case in San Diego." Marcus chuckled. "I owe a lot of people beers. But you," he pointed at Noah, "you owe your aunt more than that." Noah looked at me, and for once didn't argue. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know." The rest of the day rolled on simple and steady. Dinner was messy. Lily knocked over a glass of milk, and we all laughed. The sound filled the room like a reminder that peace doesn't always look perfect, it just sounds honest. When the dishes were done and the lights dimmed, I stepped outside one last time. The air was warm, the kind that holds the smell of dust and life. The porch swing creaked behind me as Noah sat down beside Lily, her head resting on his arm. Margaret stood in the doorway, watching them with that look only a sister can have, regret mixed with relief. I watched them all, and thought about everything it had taken to get here. The long nights, the courtroom battles, the years of silence that almost broke us. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. And survival, in its own way, was sacred. Noah caught my eye and said softly, "You ever miss it? The uniform?" "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly I miss what it stood for. Honor, discipline, clarity." He nodded. "You still live by it, you know. Just different battlefield." I smiled. "Maybe so." The sky was fading from gold to blue, the cicadas buzzing low. Lily's laughter floated across the yard as she chased fireflies, her small hands glowing each time she caught one. And standing there, watching her, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace didn't mean the end of the fight. It meant you'd finally earned the right to rest. As the night settled, I walked down the steps, the wood warm under my feet, the air thick with the scent of orange blossoms. I joined Noah and Lily under the tree, where the swing moved just enough to make the chains hum. Lily looked up at me, her smile small but bright. "Grandma, are we okay now?" I brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, honey, we're okay." The bells from the church down the street began to ring, soft and clear against the evening air. Each note felt like it was closing a door that didn't need to stay open anymore. I looked up at the fading sky and whispered more to myself than anyone else. Justice doesn't wear a uniform, but it still demands courage. And in that quiet, I knew we'd finally found ours.